Dr. Remembrances, Washington, on behalf of the National Space Society and the National Capital Space Society, which is the local chapter. I hope everybody's having a good time, no problems. If there are, let us know. We're here to help. And right now, Charlie Walker is going to do an introduction and introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Lori, and welcome. Welcome to the 11th International Space Development Conference, and we'll see if we can minimize this hum. If I can hear it, I know you guys can. It's a real pleasure to be able to open this morning's session, and in fact the weekend with you all. It's more a pleasure to see so many faces than it is to, in fact, be here and open it, because it's you that will be gaining from this weekend's events. It's the nation's space program, I believe, that will consequently gain from what you learn and from the actions that you take as a consequence of the information and the inspiration that you get from this weekend. So, to me, the real emphasis is out there. It's you folks. But before we move along with the weekend's activities, starting with our speaker this morning, let me say a few things. In particular, I want to tell you that the National Space Society is dedicating this year's annual meeting to Gene Roddenberry. I feel no need to go through any extensive biography by any way or means of Gene, and I say Gene with a great deal of pride, because I knew him personally, and I know that you all know Gene Roddenberry as the creator of a true vision, a dream that in various ways we all strive to see become reality. Star Trek, the Star Trek universe of the future. Gene, who, to those who were much involved in the concepts therein and the ideas, the dreams, knew him as the great bird of the galaxy. Well, Gene has risen beyond all of this now, and for his contributions, not only to the National Space Society as a member of the Board of Governors for many years, but to the nation and the world of humanity as a whole, we want to dedicate this conference. I also want us to remember that within less than the past year, the community of space visionaries, those, and within that group I include all of you, that community, our community, has lost, and we want to remember a number of individuals. Isaac Asimov, James Webb, the second administrator of NASA, Tom Paine, the third administrator of NASA, and a man whom we all know and recognize as the principal architect of this nation's space program in the 60s, the 70s, and in fact another visionary as he chaired the President's National Commission on Space in the early 80s. We also want to remember Jim Fletcher, Dr. Fletcher, who was the fourth administrator of NASA, very involved in the National Space Society and space cause. And finally, I want us to all recognize and remember the memory of Dr. Gerard K. O'Neill, physicist, inventor, in fact, the modern father of popular space colonization and industrialization, the true father, I proudly say, of the high frontier, and a man that brought focus on visions, dreams that I had in the early 70s with his rather profound and popular, very popular concepts for large-scale settlement and utilization for human benefit of extraterrestrial resources. So for all of those individuals who have contributed so much to what we're here today and tomorrow to listen to study on further, to think about further, their lights have gone out here on the home planet. But their far-flung stars will continue to shine and to, in fact, guide humanity into the universe. And I'd like to ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Let me also read to you a part of a letter which I have. It begins, "Dear friends, it gives me great pleasure to extend my warmest greetings to everyone attending the 1992 International Space Development Conference. This year's theme, Treasures of Discovery, which focuses on the benefits of space to the human and American peoples, illustrates just why a vigorous space program is important to this nation's future competitiveness. Over the past 3 years, the President and I have carried out major space initiatives that are laying the groundwork for long-term American leadership in the exploration, economic use, and eventual settlement of space. Nearly all of our major space policy directives emphasize the important role of the private sector in developing the space frontier. I know that you share my view that space is truly our best investment in the future. Your imagination and creativity will define the opportunities for everything from developing earthbound industrial capabilities based on space technology to creating new space-based industries which will revolutionize our nation's economy. Best wishes for a memorable and successful conference. Signed, sincerely, Dan Coyle, Vice President of the United States." Now, let me introduce with great pleasure a man who I am very pleased to be able to call a friend, Charles F. Bolden, Jr., Colonel, United States Marine Corps, and NASA astronaut. I won't go through his long, lengthy, and very well accomplished biography to date, and I know that by the time he's done on this world, it's going to be many, many pages longer too. So, but let me tell you a few. Charlie received a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical science from the U.S. Naval Academy. And he followed that with a Master of Science in Systems Management from USC. Charlie had quite an extensive career after his commissioning into the Marine Corps, and has included, in the late 70s, graduation from the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School at Pax River, just down the road. And his experience both in Vietnam and in combat duty, as well as in exercises and on station around the world, has been in the A6 and A7 aircraft. He has logged more than 5,000 hours of flight time. Charlie was selected in 1980 as a NASA astronaut candidate and got those wings in August of '81. Now Charlie is a veteran of 3 space flights. He was the pilot of SDS-61C in January 1986, and you will remember, I know, that on that crew, Charlie was one of the NASA team that piloted the first member of the United States House of Representatives into space. Charlie, I would have thought that would have really keyed you into what Washington was like. I was surprised to see you back in town. But that didn't put Charlie off to space, most certainly, because he next got left seat duty. No, he waited one more mission before he got left seat duty. He was pilot on his next mission, 1990, SDS-31, which was the Hubble Space Telescope deployment. Then Charlie got command responsibility for SDS-45, which you'll remember had a very successful mission, the first manned mission in the long litany of missions which we'll expect to see as grander results from toward the mission to planet Earth objectives. He was commander of SDS-45, which carried the Atlas payload, the Atmospheric Laboratory for Applications and Science. And now Charlie is at NASA headquarters at the request of the new NASA administrator. He has been appointed Assistant Deputy Administrator here at NASA headquarters, and while he's still at home and expects to go back to home in a few months' time to resume flight status in Houston, he's doing great things for the nation up here. And I want to just say one last thing, Charles, before I give you the podium, which is I am really impressed, really, truly impressed, beyond what I have read to the group here, because of your excellent taste. You married a walker.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and on behalf of the new NASA Administrator, Dan Bolden, I'd like to welcome those of you who are from out of town to Washington, D.C., to our nation's capital. I'm not going to hold you very long. I have my watch set. I'll try to give you some, as Charlie has said, this conference is all about you, so I will try to speak briefly and share some slides with you and then give you an opportunity to ask me some questions. Can't guarantee you I'll have answers, but I'll take the questions. This is a really exciting time for the NASA family. As all of you know, Dan Bolden has been Administrator of NASA for just under 3 months now, and we are embarked on what we all consider to be the birth of a new NASA. That's very, very important to us. What we're about right now is we're in the process of developing what we call a shared vision. Visions, hopefully everybody has them, but we're hoping that we will arrive at a vision for the future of this nation and the world that will belong to each and every one of you, as well as to all the NASA employees. And I think you will find over the next few months that you will be called upon to give us your opinions and your thoughts on where we should be headed as an agency and where this nation should be headed as far as a leader in the world of technology. There's an old church in Sussex, England, and in that church is an inscription that at least it's credited as being 250 years old. And it says, "A vision without a task is but a dream. A task without a vision is drudgery. A vision with a task is the hope of the world." So I think that's what we're about. Dan is very, very enthusiastic. He is what I would consider to be a visionary. For any of you who have had an opportunity to meet him or see him, he is a tireless individual who really believes that the U.S. Really should be at the focal point, or at the head of the needle as far as technology and technology development is concerned. And it is his hope that we as an agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, can step out and assume the lead in this country and allow the U.S. to maintain its prominence in the world of technology. For those of you who have studied the NASA budget over the years, and I imagine that's most of you, I'll just remind you that things still haven't changed very much. We still enjoy the grand and glorious, plentiful amount of about 1/4% of our nation's gross national product. However, much as my parent service, the United States Marine Corps, does, we always do the most we can with whatever we get. And it's Mr. Golden's opinion, and I think I share it with him, that that 1/4%, if we use it wisely, is quite adequate for us to do our job in leading the nation and the world in technology and technology development. So that's what we're doing. We really believe that the future is ours to claim, to do with as we please. And we think that the U.S., provided we can get people excited about venturing off this planet and into other places, can maintain our leadership in that role. Technology, we think, is the furnace for the American economy. You know, you can look at the airline industry, the aerospace industry, and we're not producing too many new airplanes nowadays. As far as the Department of Defense is concerned, we're probably going to see a steady wind down in the expenditures of the Department of Defense. And your presence here lets me know that you understand that it's through agencies like NASA and through the Department of Defense that we are able to generate the technology that we do, that puts people to work, that fuels our economy. And if the defense economy or the defense industry is going to wind down and we're to stay stable, then somebody has to pick up that shortfall. And hopefully that's what we can do at NASA. We're about programs like Space Station Freedom, which we really feel is essential because it gives us a platform from which or on which or in which we can help to further understand what the effects of long-term spaceflight are on the human species. Is that important? Well, if you don't think it's important for us to venture from the planet Earth to other places, no, it's not important. If you think that we can turn within and stay here in the confines of the United States or the other countries that presently support the space program, then no, space station is not important. But if we're to venture back to the lunar surface and on to Mars and maybe other planets or other galaxies, we need to understand fully what the long-term effects are of that travel and that existence on humankind. I see several people in the audience here who have, with me and Charlie, have enjoyed that experience. And, I think we would all tell you that you really do learn lots of things in a very brief period of time when you venture away from the planet. Some of them are surprising, some of them are lessons that we relearn, but we think it's very important. So that, in a nutshell, is one of the greatest advantages that we hope to gain from Space Station Freedom, and that is to give us a platform from which we can study the effects on humankind. If I can get someone to turn that projector on for me, and is there a way to dim the lights? Or do we have them all or none? As I mentioned before, this weekend belongs to you, so I will hustle so that you can ask questions. If something comes up as we're going through these slides, please feel free to jump right in, because I don't want you to forget your questions, because I might forget the answer. This is kind of the way that the human adventure into space starts nowadays. That's the shuttle that all of you are very familiar with. And that was my shuttle, Atlantis, as we were off on the start of our venture of what we call STS-45, Atlas, the Atmospheric Laboratory for Applications in Science. Atlas represented the first in a series of about 10 or 11 flights over the next 11 years, or this solar cycle, where we hope to get the vantage point from space back to our planet, our home planet Earth, to help us understand a little more about what's happening to our environment, what's happening to the atmosphere, what is the sun doing, and how do they interplay? What is the relationship, the interrelationship between the forces of of our sun, our star, and this planet that we call home Earth? Very interesting ride. It's relatively gentle from the beginning, except for the vibration, and it gets better as you go along. This is a slide that we call Atlas over the Atlas, because you're looking into the payload bay of Atlantis at the Atlas complement of experiments, about 13 different experiments that we use to do 14 or so scientific investigations, as I mentioned, into our atmosphere as well as of our sun. And we even had one FAUST, the Far Ultraviolet Space Telescope, which did some studies into the solar system. That's actually the Atlas Mountains in the background, the anti-Atlas to be exact, cloud covered there. You're looking to the east over the western Sahara Desert. The dust storm that you see down on the left-hand side of the screen was pretty interesting to us because we watched it over the next day or so as it blew northward across the Mediterranean Sea, and then we were told by some of our friends on the ground that a lot of that deposited itself in areas like Yugoslavia over a 2-day period of time. You see many things from the vantage point of space that make our Earth very interesting. Here's another view of the Western Sahara during the Space Telescope mission. And that, again, is just a giant dust storm. You can see kind of in this area, all that kind of beige material there is dust just kicking up over the Sahara. I'd ask you to kind of, I'll get down here. watch this part right here. Just kind of hold that in your mind, because we took that with like I'm not sure, I think a 90mm lens on a Linhof camera, which gives you a big picture. This next one we took with like a 100mm lens on a handheld camera. And this is the same dust storm. This is the leading edge of the storm over the Sahara. And the scientists tell us when we came back that that's about 16,000 feet high. There are a lot of mountains that aren't that high, and that's a dust storm blowing up over the western Sahara. So you get an opportunity to see the forces of nature at work. You're also, though, because we are humans who are naturally inquisitive and wanting to share what we do with people, we generally like to take the opportunity to come back and share what we've seen and done with our fellow people. In this particular case on Atlas, we were able to talk real time with a lot of you on the ground. I don't know whether any of you did discuss things with us, but we had one of our secondary experiments on board was called SAREX, Shuttle Amateur Radio Experiment. And I know Pam Bacon is out in the audience, who works in the education branch at NASA headquarters. And I think Pam would echo the fact that on this flight, as well as other flights that have flown SAREX, we got an awful lot of just great warm feelings because of all the young people around the world with whom we were able to communicate. This is just a small handheld ham radio. We stuck an antenna in the window, and it enabled us to talk to people as we ventured around the world. We talked to thousands of school kids. Many of them were in prepared settings where they knew we were going to call at a certain time, so they were able to get their questions ready, and they fired them at us, and we tried to fire answers back at them. Their questions were a lot tougher than the ones I usually get from adult audiences. They're pretty sharp kids, but that was SAREX. And Barbara Morgan is here, I think, because she will speak with you later. And I'm not sure whether we talked to any of the kids in Barbara's class out in Idaho. Did we, Barbara? No? Okay. There are other things that we do, however. On my previous flight on STS-31, in addition to deploying the Hubble Space Telescope, we did a number of medical experiments. Charlie had the opportunity to fly what we call the electrophoresis operations in space on his 3 missions in the shuttle. There is ongoing effort to understand the interaction of the human body in the weightlessness of space. What does the absence of gravity do? We know that it causes the bones to give up minerals. Calcium is shed from the bones, and frequently it flows through the body into the brain. That's not good, so we're trying to figure ways to counteract it. We know that exercise helps some, but we're looking at ways to combat that if you're going to be in space for longer than periods of, say, 6 to 9 days, as we have been to date. This was an experiment in which we were trying to see what the reaction of weightlessness was, or what the reaction of the body's immune system was to weightlessness in space. So this is Kathy Sullivan's, the back of her head anyway, and she's going to stick me with about, I think it's about 32 different little prongs. There were 8 or so circular sets of prongs that had little antigens in the middle of the circle, and so she's going to inject that in my body, much like a TB test that all of you are familiar with. And basically, the purpose of the test was to see how my body and those of 3 others on the crew reacted to the various antigens in the weightlessness of space. We had done the same experiment prior to the flight, so we had a baseline on which to go, and then we did the experiment again a 3rd time when we returned to land. One of the interesting findings was that the body's immune system is somewhat suppressed when you get into the weightlessness of space. Is that important? Yes. You only need to imagine what it would be like if you were going to venture off for, say, 6 months, 9 months, or a year on your way to another planet, and you were not able to keep yourself free of infections and the like if the body's immune system is going to be suppressed. Does it have an application to us here on Earth? I think so. What is AIDS? It's a deficiency that attacks our immune system and causes it not to act the way we want it to act. Very similar to what happens to the human body in space. Are they related? I don't know. But medical science hopefully will help us understand whether there is any relation. So there's great value to having human experimentation in space. What about the ability to respond quickly and use the human brain and the human hands and body when things unexpected happen? This was on STS-31 again. Kathy Sullivan here and Bruce McCandless had been trained for contingency spacewalks in case something happened with the Hubble Space Telescope and we were unable to get everything deployed automatically the way it was supposed to happen. As things happened, we had problems getting the solar arrays deployed on Hubble, and we actually had to put Bruce McCandless and Kathy Sullivan in their suits in the airlock, and we were about 5 minutes away from sending them out to do a spacewalk to manually deploy the solar arrays on Hubble when the ground was able to figure out the problem and solve it with software, with computers. Had that not happened, we would have been able to send them out, and I think we would have seen a very successful operation, just as you saw recently on the flight of Endeavour, when things didn't work out at first, but then humankind put their brains to work and got their bodies to do the right thing. This is the deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope. A great moment for us on the crew. Spectacular. We were overjoyed when this occurred. We were somewhat saddened when we came back, and several weeks later learned that the mirror had a problem. But we had faith, and our faith has been borne out because Hubble produces data now that is significantly better than anything that we ever got from instruments on the Earth. And we hope to revisit Hubble in late '93 or early '94, put an optical correcting instrument on it that we call COSTAR, which will enable us to regain about 80% of the capability of the telescope that it was designed to have. So this would enable us to explore our universe. Have we seen things that were unexpected from Hubble? Yes, we have. I think all of you have seen this particular representation. It's an image on the left from Los Campanas Observatory down in Chile, I think. And then on the right is an image in a similar area of the sky, the southern hemisphere, from Hubble, from the Wide Field Planetary Camera. I just kind of call your attention to the big blob up top. You noticed it looks like a nice big star. And that's what we all thought. We picked this area. I say we. I use the term very loosely. The astronomers picked this area because it's an area with which they were very familiar. They were familiar with the constellation from which these stars, or in which these stars are located, and very familiar with the large star there, we thought. Once we started looking at the data a little more closely, there's the same image enhanced from Los Campanas on the left. On the right, we find out that the reason it looked a little bit different when we looked at it, when we imaged it with Hubble, is because it wasn't a star. It's what we call a double star. Just two stars, and for perhaps hundreds of years we had been thinking we knew what this was, and this was the very first image to come to Earth from Hubble, what we call our first light photo, and we found that it was an astronomical discovery, no pun intended. What about what's going on in the Earth on Earth right now? Some of you enjoy the beauty of the morning sunrises and the evening sunsets, and you enjoy all the reds that you see. It's getting a little bit less red over the last few weeks and months. But a lot of it we can attribute to the activity in this part of the world. Right up in the top there, right under the clouds here is Mount Pinatubo. This is Manila Bay, the city of Manila right down here. The palace is somewhere there. But Mount Pinatubo, when it erupted last spring, deposited particulates in the atmosphere which will be there for years. Does it have any effect on us? Well, I think it does. Scientists seem to think it does. In fact, this was another volcano that a lot of you are familiar with. It's Mount St. Helens. This is an infrared image taken because it enables us to enhance the vegetation in the area. Earth scientists can use it to better their studies. All this area in red is vegetation. The area right around the mountaintop itself, and this is the blast, the front of the blast area, where the side of the mountain was just blown off. Spirit Lake there with some timber in it, devoid of any foliage and vegetation right now. But you can see down in this area, I'm told that Weyerhaeuser gets the credit for the little pinks that you see in there, where they're already in the process of trying to reforest the area there. Mount Rainier up in the top left-hand corner, and Mount Adams there. Again, the vantage point of space gives us an opportunity to study some of the results of natural phenomena and hopefully get some answers that we would not otherwise be able to get. I attribute this to a great extent to Mount Pinatubo. That's my assessment. I don't know. I'm not an atmospheric scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but that's one of our sunrises on STS-45 a couple of months ago. We see, as I mentioned again, the colors are there primarily because of the particulate matter in the atmosphere. The atmosphere acts very much as a prism, takes the white light of the sun, breaks it into the natural colors that we know as the rainbow, and gives us all the pretty colors there. because of the particulates in the atmosphere. We were told that for about 30 kilometers, it's actually hard to get the full force of the sunlight, or the full effect of sunlight as it rises, because of all the debris in the atmosphere at the present time. Interesting phenomena there, where the white sunlight is being kind of trapped in the upper reaches of our atmosphere and spread out to help us with this beautiful picture. This was one of the primary purposes of our mission, was to study the aurora. It's caused, as most of you know, or as some of you may know, by the interaction of charged particles from our sun and other places in our solar system that enter our Earth's atmosphere, frequently in the polar regions, because they follow the magnetic field lines and zing in up there. As they bombard the atmosphere, they cause electrons and other particles to be emitted. Sometimes when they sink back to their natural levels, we get energy that's given off in the form of light, and that gives us the aurora here. What some people call the southern lights, or the aurora australis. In our particular case, we were orbiting at 160 miles, and the aurora in this picture were actually above our orbital altitude. So on each night pass, we would have the opportunity to fly through the aurora. That's actually the shuttle that you see in the upper left-hand portion of the screen there. So you can see as we're flying. There's the old home planet. That's Earth. There's a lot that we need to do as far as exploring other worlds, but it's all hopefully going to bring something home to us to enable us to keep this planet safe and survivable for humankind. If we study other planets that look very similar to ours, Mars, Venus, for example, perhaps we can learn things from their history that will help us from allowing the same kinds of things to happen here on this planet. I don't know. That all remains to be seen. We can go ahead and get the lights back on. There are recent events in the city of Los Angeles, for example, would cause people to say, yeah, but can we afford to spend money on extravagant things like the space program, or visionary things like the space program? We have real problems here at home. My personal feeling is that the experiences of the recent past in Los Angeles open a window of opportunity for us. They should teach us that if we can give people an opportunity to contribute, to do things that are beneficial to humankind, then there's much less time for discord and disunity. It's a time for us to bring the people of the nation and the world together. Technology will do that. As I mentioned earlier, technology is the furnace for our economy. Technology is also a driver in another respect. I would be foolish to tell you that we need space station, or we need to go to space so that we can create jobs. If that's the only reason you're going to do it, there are a lot of other things that can do that. But one thing that space does that almost nothing else can do is it fires up the imagination. It really invigorates kids. It makes them want to learn. It makes them hungry for knowledge. Is that important? Yes, I think so. The poet Khalil Gibran wrote a little passage once that said, a little knowledge that acts is worth infinitely more than much knowledge that is idle. What does that say to me? It says we don't need to produce Einsteins. We don't need to produce Galileos. They will come, but that's not essential. We do need to produce fertile minds who have the knowledge and the willpower to explore and to imagine. My feeling is that a childlike sense of imagination and desire for exploration is the largest force that drives us to discovery. Why do we leave the planet? Because that's human nature. The human species, you and I want to know what's out there. Why do we venture out into the dark when people tell us it's dangerous? Why do kids do it? They go out there because you told them it's dangerous. That's exciting. It makes them want to know what makes it dangerous out there. That's what God did with us. That's why we have a brain and a lot of other species on the earth don't. That is human nature, to want to explore and to search and to ask questions. That's the driving force that causes us to leave the planet. Is that important? Let me leave that question with you. As far as I'm concerned, as far as Dan Bolden is concerned, the magic is back at NASA. As we walk around and visit NASA centers, people are invigorated. Some of them are afraid. Let me tell you, because we're talking about doing real bold and different things. We're talking about doing the same kinds of things that we've done over the last 20, 30 years in much smaller packages. We're talking about doing it much cheaper and doing all this much quicker without compromising safety. Can it be done? Yes. We've seen that it can be done. We've seen it in Defense Department programs. We've seen it with Cassini, which is one of the experiments that JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, is developing right now that will fly in the next few years. They have made large cuts from that program without sacrificing science. So we know it can be done. We know we can do it. We can do it cheaper, we can do it faster, and we can do it with no compromise to safety. And that's very important. Dan and I would ask you to join us with our shared vision. When we give you the opportunity in the next coming weeks and months to express your opinions about where we ought to be going, don't hesitate. I know you won't. You never have when you ask. But if it does not feel like it's your program, if you don't feel like you're a partner, then we're not doing right. And that's the message that he brings to NASA and to the American public. Is that frightening? Yes, especially if you're a manager. You know, because they've got us. We've got to figure out how to take all these inputs and turn them into action, because you can't sit around forever and have big discussion groups. You know, sooner or later you've got to take all these ideas and focus them to a point, because that'll get us where we want to go. There's no better time than the present, you know, to invest in our future. So I encourage you to continue the work that you've done. Again, as I said, our vision should be your vision. If it's not a shared vision, it won't be worth anything. From that shared vision, we hope to develop the missions for NASA of the future, the next 10, 20, 30 years. Dan likes to talk about the next 500 years. None of us are going to be around, but our kids and grandkids and great-greats will, hopefully. Like Charlie said, hopefully I will add a few pages to my biography, or my, whatever they call it, before I leave this earth. You know, hopefully we can leave something for our kids and our grandkids before they leave this earth. Do you have any questions before I sit? Yes?
Well, I wonder if there's any things that be done to take some of the long-term effects of microgravity on the body that the Soviet Union and the Russians have done and use them. Because you're talking to using the space station to do that. Is there a problem with that?
NASA has been involved in cooperative programs with the former Soviet Union, the Russian space program, over a number of years, and we're in the process right now. We have, in recent months, have sent several groups of people over to the Soviet Union to work with their life sciences folk, as well as to look at their hardware technology to see where it may have applicability to some of the programs that we do. So there has been an ongoing program, and it's being stepped up now to see what lessons we can learn from their long-duration space experiences. I don't need to tell you, you know better than I do, that almost every single day of our adult lives, there was a Soviet or some type of person who launched from within the confines of the former Soviet Union and orbited our planet. We had long years when we didn't have anyone there, and they were there the whole time. So we will never catch up with them as far as the experience of long-duration spaceflight. They've got a number of people who have flown for more than a year, so we have a lot to learn from them, and we're trying to do that. The young lady right here first. Yeah.
Thank you. Colonel Bolden, thank you very much for being with us this morning. I have actually 3 questions, and they're interrelated. The first question has to do with Dan Bolden's opening remarks when he came to NASA, indicating that he was going to take, I believe, a 3-week period to develop a shared vision statement. Obviously, we're beyond that. I was wondering, first of all, can you give us a status of where you're at and sort of milestone chart? The second question, I'd like to ask you to give some insight to this audience as to the process with the blue team, red team activity that's going on. This leads up to my third question, which is that within the NASA community and within the contractor community, there are rumors running at high speed vis-a-vis the space station, from 30% cut to redesign to mothballing. I'd like to ask you to comment on that.
Let me make a big, quick comment. You've asked questions that hopefully will all be answered Tuesday afternoon. The blue team, red team concept that a lot of you probably want, what in the world is she talking about? Basically what we're doing is an internal review of the agency from top to bottom. Those people who are in programs and are doing this review, we call the blue team. We have other smaller teams that are kind of on the outside of this that we call the red team that are acting as the conscience, kind of tapping these guys on the shoulder periodically and saying, hey, are you really taking a serious look at that? And did you think about, for example, those teams are getting together Tuesday morning. The leaders for those teams are getting together Tuesday morning. They met with Mr. Golden. The red team leaders have just been finalized. So this Tuesday, Mr. Golden will probably make public the identity of not just the team leaders, but the members of the red teams and perhaps even the blue teams if they've all been completed in structuring at that time. He'll also tell you what his timetable is, maybe, for arriving at our shared vision. I think he probably found, as all of you anticipated, that if you're really going to have a shared vision, one that you get input from across the agency and then go out and talk to your partners in the community, in industry, and your international partners, that you can't do it in 3 weeks. It takes a long time. He's been talking with NASA employees for a couple of months now and getting their input. He still hasn't visited all the NASA centers. So I'd say we're probably a couple of months away from having what is our final shared vision that we can bring to all of you. We would hope, ideally, to have that done by the same time you go send your request for money to Congress, perhaps, because then you can tell them, okay, here's what we're really all about. Here's where we're trying to go. As far as cuts in space station and other programs, I think it's premature to assume that we're going to do anything, because if I can give you just a real quick description of how you go about these reviews, you say, okay, you throw caution to the wind. You say everything is fair game. Let's relook at space station. Let's relook at shuttle. Should we be flying shuttle? Do I know what the answer is going to be? I sure hope so, but I can't say that's going to be the answer, because there is, you have NASA is a big community. You have people who really believe in robotics. You have people who really believe in human space flight. Some of them understand that it's very important to meld those together into a balanced program. I would be lying to you if I said that there aren't some who don't feel that feel that you should get rid of the human side and do only robotics and expendable launchers. There are people on the human side that say, hey, forget about all that planetary exploration. Let's just keep putting humans in space. Anything we want to do, we can do with humans. We can go sit on the moon for a little while, and then we can venture off to Mars, and it'll be all right. Just have faith. There are people on both ends of the spectrum. We're trying to meet in the middle and find out what NASA really should be about. So it would be premature of me to try to guess what kind of cuts, if any, you're going to see in space station. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that we're not going to be able to spend any more than Congress appropriates. Okay, that's fact. If you can figure out a way that we can do that, let me know. And then we won't do any of this review. But we are trying to return to reality. And the reality is that Congress appropriates a certain amount of money. If you design programs that exceed that pot of money, then something's not going to get done. And we want to do everything that we tell the American public we're going to do. And we have not been able to do that to date because we always carry something, something that's real important outside the confines of that budgetary figure. And you're hoping that somebody will find some more money. Well, it's not going to happen. There's pressure to put money into social programs, pressure to put money into the cities. As I hope you got my message, I think that's very important. I think by investing in NASA, by investing in a sound, steady, even space program where you develop technology, you are directly investing money into the cities. Because where do we produce the technology? You do it in the cities. Who does it? The same people that were out rioting and wrecking stores in downtown LA, if all goes well, will become productive citizens and will be working in a plant somewhere, producing something that's going to help us get to the moon and Mars. And that's not folly. That's not dreaming. That's reality. If you look around this room, and do that, just look around the room and look at the complexion of the room. Okay? Does that tell you anything? America is a melting pot. Some people say it's not really a melting pot. It's one of these things that's all stirred up and stuff still going. But there's a large segment of our society that has a little knowledge. Some of them have a lot of knowledge that's just not being adequately utilized right now. we're being foolish in the way that we utilize one of our greatest resources, which is human beings. And we can no longer afford to do that. You know, your society can not long afford to exist without involving more people that are a little bit different than you, who may have a lot of different ideas than you in some cases, because that's what makes you a stronger society. Diversity and being able to deal with that diversity makes you much, much stronger. If you try to put everybody in this little basket that all think the same way you do, sooner or later, you know, a lot of things go away. Maybe your willpower and all that. And great nations, many great nations, were not destroyed by anybody from the outside. Great nations frequently are destroyed because at some point in their lifetime, they lose their willpower. And they begin to think only about themselves. And they look inward and reflect inward and feel and forget about the future. The United States is at a point like that. You know, we're at a point like that. We could start to look inward and think that exploration of our universe is not important. And before you know it, the outside forces will understand what we're doing. They will understand our lack of willpower. Time will out and we'll be destroyed. Not because they're mightier than we were, but because we gave up our willpower. So that's very, very important. Last question, way in that.
Are you doing anything new to listen to the general public and find out what sort of space program they would like to see in their own words?
As a matter of fact, when I talk about this shared vision, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We have had a number of small meetings already that Dan Golden has sat in on with groups of 20, 25 people from industry, academia, as well as the NASA community, where all they did was talk for 6, 8 hours about what NASA ought to be doing, you know, where NASA should be going. We could do that with everybody in general, but it would be chaos. What we're trying to do is we're trying to give first shot at that vision to the people who are in the family, the NASA employees. Once that's done, we're going to share that with everybody, and our intent is to get inputs from industry, from academia, from the general populace, so that, as I said before, that the vision of NASA is a shared vision, not just something that we cooked up, you know, in a laboratory, that you all kind of say, yeah, well, that's nice, but. Now, are we going to satisfy everybody? No. That's impossible. We couldn't satisfy everybody in this room. We can't satisfy everybody in the administrator's office. That's a far smaller group. But by reaching consensus, by putting your heads together and deciding, okay, this is what I'm hearing most people are saying, and we all agree that this is probably the way to go, then we'll develop that shared vision. So, I thank you very much for the support you've given us in the past, and look forward to working with you.
Charlie's got to catch that flight back to Houston. Since I don't think he's sitting in the left seat on this one, he's got to be there when it leaves the gate. I just want to, before you all get on your way to the numbers of sessions, and I know I've met a goodly number of you folks, and I know that as you go on into the day that you're going to be not just sitting in one track, but you're going to be mobile between tracks, not just between papers, but during papers. So as you begin to go through your day in that regard, let me just reflect on one point that Charlie made loud and clear, which is input. Input to what he's called the new NASA, and what I know we all expect and want to see as a new NASA. And you'll probably hear a lot of jibing about the new golden age. Well, you can help it to become the GOLDEN age with some input that you have gotten from the National Space Society. A request that's signed to you from Buzz Aldrin to input the the personal message that you would make to NASA and specifically to Dan Golden in terms of what this nation and the peoples of this planet should be doing as we direct ourselves upward and outward. It's our intent, it's Buzz Aldrin's intent to personally deliver your thoughts along with previous survey results, the 1992 Space Policy Survey that again I believe you as members of the society have gotten, filled out, returned, and that those messages will be delivered. That your input can be had in that one way, but not solely in that one way, because as you all know, you're all participants in and members of a nation and a country that does allow input of information, input of opinion, and I think that at NASA we have a leader who is willing to listen, especially to those who can cogently and with knowledge, and you all have both the knowledge and certainly the ability to transmit that in an understandable and credible way to do so. So we can all be heard both as a group, and let's expect and hope, and I know we're all working for that group to grow, and as individuals within that group deliver the message. So let's go out and have some fun and learn some things this weekend and keep putting those messages together. Thank you all very much for your time this morning, and let's be at it.